What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Joystick Ayrton. It's been a little while, and I promise you, I am alive, and I do happen to have a Lenovo Legion GO. And this video is going to be a little bit different, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, welcome back to the channel, everybody. I appreciate each and every single one of you watching. It's been about 60 days since I've posted. It's been a crazy time. More about that at the end of the video, but this is all about the Lenovo Legion GO. So this is going to be a little bit of a different video. I've spent about an entire week testing this out, checking different benchmarks, performances, playing with bugs, and I'm not going to do a video like the Phawx or a video like Retro Game Corps, because if you want to know all the ergonomic details of it, you're going to go watch those guys' videos anyway. I don't want to make a carbon copy of the same thing. So this is going to be tackling this device in a completely different light than any of those guys even looked at it. And I think that's why I disagree with almost every single video I've seen so far so much. I haven't seen a video I completely agree with yet, I don't think. And ETA Prime did a fantastic job. I enjoyed that video. I enjoyed the Phawx's video. I enjoyed Retro Game Corps, but I heavily disagreed with a lot of the things they were saying. And some of that comes down to Lenovo's fault, because some of it is simple. It's marketing, and it was poorly marketed. FPS mode and this and that, and so we'll talk more about that as we dive deeper and deeper into the video. So let's go ahead. We're going to rip this thing out of the case. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. I wrote an entire script. I'm going to loosely try to follow that, but after watching the Phawx's video today and Retro Games Corps video today and Nerd Nest's video and Fan the Deck, I am in a whirlwind of emotions on how I feel about all of their opinions and mine. So let's go ahead. We're going to rip this thing out and talk about all of it. Okay, so I've really fumbled through this for 10 or 15 minutes before recording this. I really wanted to kind of get down to what the meat and potatoes of the script or the device in general is. And I want to pack that into the front of this video, but I am going to have timestamps down below so you can jump around and find whatever you're looking for. But I want you to get all the information you could need, take that, make whatever decision you think is best, and let me know in the comments section down below. So we're going to start off with what I think you are probably the most curious about or most concerned about, and that's the screen. So the Lenovo Legion GO has a 16:10 aspect ratio. That's the exact same as the Steam Deck. The only two differences on this screen between it and the Steam Deck are the bezels are smaller on the Lenovo and the refresh rate is much higher. It's also 2 inches bigger, obviously, or 1.8 if you wanted to do that math. So the 16:10 aspect ratio is different than the Win 4 or the ROG Ally. Those are both 16:9, which is your typical aspect ratio. The two major caveats with this screen that everybody is concerned about, and you hear it in every video, Fan the Deck, Phawx, Retro Game Corps, the Nerd Nest, all of them. Two things. This device does not have VRR. Neither does the Steam Deck. Neither does the GPD Win 4, but the ROG Ally does. And this is a portrait display. The Steam Deck is portrait. The Win 4 is portrait. There's a caveat to the Win 4, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But those are the two main things. No VRR, and it's a portrait display. In my opinion, those are completely irrelevant to any handheld gaming in any way, shape, or form. 99.9% of you watching this video, whether this video gets 1 million views or if it gets 5, I would argue that 99% of you will never run into an issue with a portrait display. Now, there are some situations where Windows errors can occur, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. But the games that don't run from DirectX 7 that need a wrapper to be installed for them to function are not more than likely games that you're going to play. When the Phawx talks about these games or the issues that you run into where the game just won't launch or it crashes or it stutters so bad and it's not functioning in basically any way, shape, or form, or it looks like it's on its last leg, those are titles that 98% of us have never heard of, don't care about, and aren't going to play on a $750 handheld anyway. So why does it matter? Well, it really doesn't, because unless you are one of those people like him who's in that top 1%, it's never going to affect you. You might run into a Windows error here or there, and we'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes, but that's not going to affect you. So portrait display or landscape display, you should throw that out of the water as long as you're a normal, everyday user, gamer, enthusiast. There's a few games from back in the day that you won't be able to play, but guess what? There's workarounds for that. There's wrappers you can install. There's all kinds of community-driven support for these things. And 3 days in, I was able to solve most of the issues with simple downloads from just enthusiasts out there like us. So if you're in the top 1% of those people super concerned about the portrait display, there are workarounds for it. Yeah, you got one extra step to do, but more than likely you're already jumping through all the emulator steps at that point anyway, so what the hell. And if you're like anybody else, more than likely you're not going to have issues. You might run into a Windows error, but more on that later. The second thing everybody freaks out about is no variable refresh rate. Everybody loses their mind over this one, and it's up in the air a little bit, but VRR didn't come out until about 3 years ago. And before the end of the video, I will put up the exact date of when VRR became a mainstream thing, but it's really not been around very long. We've been using handhelds, we've been using the Steam Deck, the Win 4 devices for a really long time with no VRR. It doesn't fix game stuttering. That's not what it does. It makes the screen, when you're having very high and very low frame rates bouncing back and forth, it makes it less tearing. So the screen doesn't look like it's tearing as much. It's very non-noticeable, especially in a gaming handheld. It's highly used on devices like the Series X, the PlayStation 5, the Series S, the Switch. All of these games that are on large TVs where it's stretching itself to be the size of the TV and can cause tearing and different issues. That's where VRR makes a massive difference. Not so much on one of these handhelds. I would argue that you couldn't tell the difference between the displays having VRR or no VRR if you had them all in front of you and you didn't know. So we're going to show some gameplay from the ROG Ally, from the Lenovo Legion GO, from the deck, from the Win 4, and show you that there's no difference there, and it doesn't matter. And the best quote that I can tell you from a major tech tuber or YouTuber that I was watching was the Nerd Nest saying, "This is a fantastic screen, and if I didn't know from Lenovo that it didn't have VRR, I would have no idea." So it's not an issue. So no VRR, portrait display, completely irrelevant. What you have to decide is, do you want a massive screen? 8.8 inches. This thing is hefty. It is big compared to this 6-inch GPD Win 4 or the slightly smaller 7-inch Steam Deck, although in reality holding the deck and the Lenovo Legion GO, there's really not a whole bunch of difference there. So it's a beautiful screen. I absolutely love the size, and we'll talk more about that later in another section where we talk about the sizing and the weight and everything. But screen's awesome. You don't need VRR, and portrait doesn't matter at all for the normal 99% of us. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so before we move on from the screen, actually, I did forget to tell everybody this is 144 hertz refresh rate. I think that's just a marketing ploy, to be completely honest with you, because there's not a whole lot of games that you're going to play at that high of a refresh rate. And most people, I think, care a lot about battery life. Lowering that down to 60 and staying within that range makes that a lot better as well. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about the screen as a whole, because I forgot about it in the previous section. So the next thing that I think most people think about or care about or want to know about, and where I heavily disagree with pretty much every single thing the Phawx has to say, is FPS mode. But I do think this is where Lenovo messed up, and where they opened the door for people who don't necessarily like it to be right. And that's the marketing behind it. So this is FPS mode, where you have your right Joy-Con. You can flip the toggle on the bottom, turn this guy into a mouse, use the WASD for your left Joy-Con, and so on and so forth. That's FPS mode, and the idea behind that is maybe you'll play Call of Duty or Doom Eternal or whatever first-person shooter you greatly enjoy. For me, I don't really understand why you would necessarily want to do that. I think when you have a handheld device and you're playing Call of Duty or Halo, you might want it to be up here, but if you're playing it far away doing WASD, your view is a little different. For me, I have a really hard time playing competitive games on my giant TV on my fireplace. I'm a little ways back from it, but I have a hard time doing that. I need to be up in the fight, my screen right here going, and that's why I really enjoy the Legion Go and its 8.8 inch screen. That's a big selling point for me. But all of that besides, I really think FPS mode should have been called RTS mode, because you can easily play Total War, you can play Warhammer, you can play Civ 6, you can play any real-time strategy game pretty much flawlessly. Company of Heroes, the first two before they added in gamepad support. There's so many RTS games that this now allows you to do. Now, I understand that the Steam Deck did at one point, like, you can do it on there and you have both of the trackpads and it's doable. This makes it way easier. So it really should be called RTS mode. Now, let's talk about this mouse. It's a little hard to get used to, but I think once you actually get used to it, I don't think you'll hate it. Now, it's all imperfect. I think I'm not going to say it's a half-baked solution, because I don't think it is. I think there's a reason for all of these keys on each one of them, because you need them when you're playing V Rising or you're playing Total War. You need all of these different macros to be able to make the game function properly. So I honestly think in an RTS setting where I'm playing Total War 3 Kingdoms or Empire or Rome, that you need all of them. And even though some of them are in hard to reach places where you might have to move your finger in a weird way, you really can't get by with any fewer amount of buttons. Whether that's an RTS game or whether you're trying to play Doom or so on and so forth, I don't know what else they could do. Now, one major design flaw that I'm going to completely and wholeheartedly agree with the Phawx on is that this base, you should have this Joy-Con somehow transform into something like this. I don't really know how to do it. I don't have an engineering degree. Even if this isn't going to be like a transformer, I have it attached to the actual unit itself. I don't disagree with the fact that that's an inconvenience, but for me personally, I have no issues having this at the bottom of the bag or the case, because I will definitely use it in what I'm going to coin RTS mode. I think that's a far more likely solution. I think there's a fairly big community of us who are going to use it just like that. So I think Lenovo, yes, this solution could be better. Where I think there's a lot of potential is they can sell different Joy-Cons. You can sell this unit by itself and have game-only centric Joy-Cons where it's just set up like the Steam Deck, where you only have a couple extra buttons for extra keys, like the back buttons on a PS5 Edge controller or an Xbox Series controller, where there's a lot of potential there for them and for third-party manufacturers to really jump into that. But I do think that they could improve on it, and getting these actually off of the device itself is somewhat hard. One thing I would like to see is if you could kind of design it yourself, and I heard that in the Nerd Nest podcast today, where it's like, you know, I'm going to go to Lenovo's website, I'm going to pick my model, I want the 2 terabyte version, and I want the RTS mode left-handed Joy-Cons for the device. That would be super cool and would give everybody their own unique experience based on whether they're left-handed or whether they plan on playing it like this or whether they only want it to be a gamepad. So I think what I'm going to coin as RTS mode is fantastic. I don't need a mouse mat. I don't need anything. I can lay in bed and play Total War Empire. And let me tell you, I've been looking for a handheld that could do that for 6 years. And this is finally the one. And the phrase that everyone keeps using is that this is the first handheld that's not missing something that the deck has. And this is actually the first handheld that not only is it not missing something the deck has, it has something the deck doesn't. It can play games the deck just can't play in that capacity. So I think FPS mode, RTS mode, in my opinion, is a huge win for Lenovo. Yes, it could definitely take some improving. The ergonomics of it is a little weird, takes some getting used to, but personally for me, once I was able to set the keys to what I wanted to, in about 5 minutes, I had it together for RTS games. First-person shooters, I'd much rather have it just set up just like the normal Lenovo Legion GO comes with the Joy-Cons on it. But I think RTS mode, FPS mode is a huge win for them. I'm super happy that they took a step towards doing something revolutionary, something nobody else is doing, because that's what makes it unique. That's a big selling point for me, and I think a bunch of other people. And I also want you to keep in mind, I think that Lenovo took risks. They gambled on the FPS mode. They gambled on the bigger screen. They gambled on a lot of things. The fact that this can just flip over and turn into a tablet, which for me is honestly pretty sweet. They gambled on the kickstand. They gambled on a lot of different things that I think turned out to be awesome, which is why I think they're getting so much blowback from the media. I would argue that it sounds like a lot of people don't like this device just by watching reviews. And I didn't hear that much animosity towards the Ally. It has SD card issues. No word, nothing but crickets from Asus. No different than them putting capacitors upside down on motherboards and trying to burn people's houses down and all kinds of different things that Asus does. But God forbid that another company takes an idea and tries to run with it. And yeah, there are flaws, but they're just getting destroyed for it, it seems like. And maybe I'm reading the room wrong, and tell me if I am in the comment section down below. But for me personally, it takes time. Yes, the software, we're going to talk about that soon, is half-baked. It might be a quarter-baked. But when the Ally came out, that software was pretty buggy to start with too. I would argue this one's a little bit worse off, but we gave the Ally the benefit of the doubt, 3 months, 4 months for them to get that thing regularly tuned up and pretty good to go. And it still has its faults. And it's got an SD card reader that catches on fire half the time. And it's got all kinds of RMA issues for bad joysticks and right bumpers. And hell, I had 3 of them. All 3 of them were bad. And I haven't had a bad device in the first year of owning it in, God, since I've been like 12. So, it just kills me. I think RTS mode is absolutely awesome. RTS mode to me, FPS mode to them. I think the marketing was wrong. And I think if that marketing was changed, you might see a completely different tune out of reviewers. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so let's move on from all of that and talk about something right down the middle. It's not really a great thing. It's not really a bad thing. It's the battery. And this battery is about 20% higher capacity than the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. And it's really hard to compare them like for like because there's so many different things on each one of those devices. And Windows is a totally different ballgame than running SteamOS and things of that nature. But with this being a 20% higher capacity battery, it runs fairly close to what the Steam Deck does. So we're going to throw up 5 different games that I've played and exactly how long the battery lasted in each one of those titles. I'm not really too worried about comparing it to the ROG Ally because with the smaller battery in that running Windows as well and having the same rumble, the RGB, that battery life is far worse than the Deck or the Lenovo Legion GO. This is pretty much on par with the Steam Deck. You're going to see about an hour and a half to 2 hours in highly, really intense games running higher presets on the TDP. And you can get between 3 and 4 hours on games like Hades and emulation. So we're going to go ahead and move on from the battery. It is acceptable for me, although I think they could have put a fairly bigger battery in such a big device. But then you have to worry about weight. So I'm all in all, I'm kind of split right down the middle. It's not a terrible thing for me. It's not a great thing. I don't care about how long it takes to charge this thing. Half the time I play with it plugged in anyway. If you want to see that, Lenovo's website gives you a fairly good description. I think it's from 0 to 70 and a half hour, from 0 to 170 minutes, give or take. And I'll buy that story. The Phawx said the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so one more thing that's kind of directly in the middle, at least for me, is the ergonomics. We're not going to talk about this super long, but I wanted to kind of cover it just so I could say the video pretty much covered all topics. If you want a more detailed version of at least the Phawx's opinion or Retro Game Corp's, I can link both of those in the description down below. But for me, it feels fine. I honestly never noticed and or hit the M2, M3, M4 buttons or any of the FPS mode, RTS mode buttons when I'm actually just playing in handheld mode. I have no problems with it whatsoever. The Joy-Cons are a tad bit on the lighter side of things, but I think the reason that is they were really trying to bring the weight down from having a bigger battery, having a bigger screen, and all the things that accompany that. You wanted to try to offset that a little bit. That's one place that they can. Like we were talking about earlier, them being able to just sell third-party or additional Joy-Cons might change that drastically. So we'll just have to see how that comes over the next few months, maybe a year or so. But the thumbsticks are a little small, but I don't mind the placement of them. You can buy cabs for them if that's an issue for you. I don't mind the D-pad at all. You're not going to be playing a very D-pad centric games. It's not the best D-pad on the planet, but for anything that you might normally play, it's pretty good. The triggers I think are fantastic. I absolutely love how big they are. I have slightly bigger hands, so maybe if you have small hands, that could be an issue for you. The bumpers are great. And again, I have no issues with FPS mode. I think it's fantastic. But placement of buttons. I do not like where the Legion 1 and Legion 2 buttons are being at the top. That's where start and select should be. And your start and select buttons being on the bottom side. Takes a little bit to get used to. I also am a big fan of the trackpad. It does a really good job. Keep in mind there is a little film cover on top of it, right? When you get it, you might not be able to tell it and you might think you're digging at something. They do a terrible job of having like a little tab to pull off of it. So just keep in mind that that is there. I saw that in a Facebook comment. So that's kind of 50-50 for me. I think the ergonomics are right in the middle. It doesn't feel as great as the Steam Deck, but it feels better than the ROG Ally or the Win 4. So let's go ahead and move on to everything that I don't like. Okay, so before everything I don't like, I did forget to mention the face buttons. They're perfectly fine. Pretty much feels like you're playing on an Xbox. So the things I don't like the placement of the L1 and the R1 buttons for the Lenovo Legion Space. And the start and select being at the bottom is really odd, and I think that those should definitely be swapped around. And I would really like a fingerprint reader. As annoying as it seems, I think that's pretty big with Windows when you don't have a keyboard like you do on the GPD devices. So those are the two big setbacks for me. The software is a buggy mess. I've had issues with different TDPs. Going over performance up to 21 watts on the first few days was causing it to be a buggy mess. I was having like quadruple or even more the amount of frames playing at 15 watts than I was at 21 watts. So there was definitely a bug going on there. Lenovo's done a fairly good job coming out and saying, hey, we're working on this, and so on and so forth. And unlike Asus and the SD card of crickets and more issues. I understand that an SD card is an SD card just by an internal drive, but if you can't bother to have an SD card reader not explode, or you can't bother to put the capacitor the right way up on a motherboard that's $700, you've lost a little bit of my faith. But that's for another video. So those are really the things that I don't like the most about it. The kickstand I'm a little iffy on, but that's really about it. Oh, one more thing. The speakers are god-awful. Like god-awful. So you got it's wishy-washy battery, wishy-washy ergonomics. I can live with that. Really bad speakers, like I want a Bluetooth or hook up directly, and thankfully with two USB-C ports I can actually hook up my dongle while charging it at the same time, so that's pretty awesome. That's really about it that I don't like. Yeah, the software sucks, but I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I'm used to the crappy Chinese software from GPD that works completely fine. It doesn't have to be as intricate as this. I think it's going to get much better as time progresses, but yeah, the software is bad, the button placement is somewhat bad, but everything else is kind of attributed to being half-baked coming out, and every device has some kind of issue at launch, kind of like the TDP one I was talking about. So the speakers is probably the biggest disappointment to me on the entire device. So one thing that I forgot to talk about, so I'm re-recording this at the very end of all of my recording, is the charging on this thing. I know I dabbled on it just a little bit, but one of the things I don't like is there's no indicator on whether or not this thing is charging, no LED, just nothing going on. And Windows has a tendency to randomly turn on when the device is turned off but plugged in. So I would be careful about putting this in the case that it comes in and using the charging flap on the bottom of the box or the bottom of the case, because it might just turn Windows on. It kind of sucks because you can't see the charge status. There's nothing that indicates that. So you might think you can just click the power button and see what percentage you're at, and no, it boots Windows on. So that's a little bit of an issue, but I think that can be changed in software. Most of the issues I have with this device can be fixed in software. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've spent the better part of the last 8 or 9 days, maybe even 10, only playing the Lenovo Legion GO. I haven't turned my PlayStation on. I haven't got on my computer. The deck has stayed exactly where it is. The Win 4, I reset and I'm getting rid of it. This device has completely changed the way that I play on the go. And I think the marketing behind it is pretty good. I think FPS mode should be called RTS mode, and I think you would take a lot of the blowback from the Phawx and Retro Game Corps and some of these channels away if it was marketed that way. But I really don't feel like we're all playing the same device. It feels more nitpicky than it has with other reviews on other devices. And I feel like they took a step and they tried to do something unique. And I don't know. I never liked Lenovo. I'll be completely honest with you. If you've made it this far in the video, I would have told every single person for about the last 10 years, don't buy a Lenovo laptop. That's a piece of garbage. Why are you doing that? And I was an Asus fanboy, and I had every single laptop. Even the laptop I have right now is an Asus laptop. And this device has completely changed how I look at trying to not be biased, for one, but also how companies can improve and how they can fall off, like the ROG Ally. To me, had a bunch of stumbles that I can't look past. It's a pretty good device, but I had 3 bad models. That's not a by accident thing. There's no way that should happen. And other things that happened with that company. I might be in a small subset, much like the Phawx, where a portrait display really messes with that inner group of 1%ers. I might be that 1% playing Total War and Civ 6 and all of these Warhammer games in FPS mode on the go. I spend a lot of time in a trailer and at hotels. So for me, it's awesome. I can play those things on the go. I also really enjoy competitive shooters, playing Halo, Apex Legends, Warzone sucks, but pretty much those games. And there's not a handheld that I can play them on quite like the Legion. And that's really that 8.8-inch screen. For me, I have to be up in the fight, and that's why I can't even play competitive games on my PlayStation hooked up to my big TV. I have to be up in it. So with the Legion GO, I can be right there. I can play it on the go. I can play it on the couch. It's awesome. There's always going to be those little quirks with Windows. That's every single Windows device. That's how the GPD had its issues and everything that was with it. And we're going to talk more about it in a later video too. But I think it's a fantastic device. I think for $700, $750 if you buy the 1 terabyte model, you're getting what I think is overall the best device for a Windows-based handheld. I think the Steam Deck has its reasons why you could say it is a better device, but I think for a Windows-based handheld, that is by far the best machine on the market. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you think I'm in the 1%. Let me know if you think I'm absolutely crazy. Let me know if you agree with my opinions on everybody else's videos, because it's been about 70 days since I've made a video, but this upset me so much that I have taken as much time as I can out of my extremely busy life right now to make this, because I think it's got its issues. It's got some bugs that need to be worked out of, but I think it's a fantastic device, and I don't think that you should be scared away from it any more than you were encouraged by the early days of the ROG Ally, when everything, it was like a war zone over there too. It's a crazy place for gaming and tech media right now, and I don't agree with most of them. But with that being said, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I have about 5 more videos planned out for this. I want to do straight benchmarks. Pretty much want to make like an 8-minute video. This has gone dragged on far too long. I want to make a video just about portrait and landscape displays in Windows and how that reflects on the Steam Deck. That is a portrait-based display, but you can't find that in any of the major YouTube channels talking crap about its portrait display, although it's a little bit different because Windows causes that to be a problem. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Interact with us in the comment section down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.